So one of the only ways that you can really limit kids' technology use in a meaningful way, where it's not just you're taking something away from them, is to replace it. And that means parents spending more time with their kids. It means taking your kids to the park, going out, throwing the ball around, going to the mall together, doing things that it's hard, if you have two working parents and a busy lifestyle. But really, it requires that level of engagement of supporting your kids' interests. Whether it's piano lessons or gymnastics or sports activities or whatever it might be, you need to invest in that at a higher level than you might have otherwise.
Welcome back to another episode of Raising the Jews Next Door. You've clicked on this because you may have seen the word technology and you're wondering, wow, how can I be a better parent in this topic of technology? It's a real challenge. It's something that our children are dealing with on an every single day basis. Maybe more constant than we hope. And it's really important for us to be able to help them to understand what does it mean to be digitally safe. And Dr. Eli Shapiro, who is the creator and founder of the Digital Citizenship Program and the project, he's the go-to person. He speaks at schools, he speaks around the country about this, and there's no one better to talk to learn from as to how we can help guide our children in this area. And it's so relevant. It's really, really relevant. And I hope that you will gain as much as I did from this conversation. Without further ado, enjoy the episode. Okay, it is such an absolute pleasure to be sitting with the go-to, the expert on technology, Jewish families, Dr. Eli Shapiro, who is, he's an expert on social and emotional functioning in terms of families in their homes, and is the go-to person for technology and education and families and all of that. So thank you so much. It's really, really a pleasure to sit down with you today to talk about, parents and how parents can, specifically child safety, but specifically in the digital world that we are living in. It's digital safety is so relevant nowadays, and every single teen or child has like the whole entire world in their pocket or on their iPad.
And adult. Yeah.
And adult, that's true. And the ages keep getting like earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in. Number one, I guess I'm curious, just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your work, and how you got started on all of this.
So first of all, thank you for the kind words. Maybe a little bit of hyperbole there, but I'll take it for now. But I got started. I'm a clinical social worker, school social worker. My doctorate's in education, and I was always focused on the social emotional literacy and functioning of kids, the affective domain of education. And in my early years, I was looking at peer relations, bullying, school-based bullying, promoting positive peer relations, and I would say 2007, 2008, when I started working on my dissertation for my doctorate, I shifted that over into the digital realm. We were hearing about cyberbullying, some of the earliest.
This is in the early, as it was just getting started.
Yeah, really. It was. There was an incident with a student from Rutgers University who had committed suicide, and I think it was about 2007. And it was a result of cyberbullying. And this is when we were first starting to hear about technology's impact in that realm. And so it was sort of a natural progression to go from traditional school-based bullying to the digital realm, cyberbullying, and that was what my research was on for my dissertation. But what I was finding really at that time was that the relationship that individuals had with technology, it was so much more than just the content of the internet or aggressive behavior, but it was our relationship with technology, the psychological impact, and told that it takes the social impact, the behavioral impact.
Wow, it's such a unique approach towards it, because I feel like everyone just uses technology but doesn't think about, at least especially in the beginning, they weren't thinking about it that way. Yeah,
and I it's interesting when you I think some of the earliest Steve Jobs presentations on the iPhone when it came out in 2007, the whole idea was that we would have this portable computer that would make things so much more efficient that we would have time for the important things. I mean, that was the idea. That was And so I started looking at that, and in our community specifically, the extent of the conversation, the dialogue was about, the content of the internet and how problematic it was.
Right.
And the solution was filters. It was the beginning and end of the conversation. And so I really just wanted to elevate the conversation. At the time I was getting asked to do internet safety speeches because people knew that I was, talking about cyberbullying.
You were the go-to. You're the go-to guy.
I guess I really wanted to talk about the other aspects of technology, not just the content, but like how is it impacting us emotionally and behaviorally, impulsivity, disinhibition, compulsivity, miscommunication, desensitization, all these things were parts of it. And so
that's where digital citizenship came from.
So that's really where it evolved from that. I was really challenged by some colleagues in the field to say, hey, you keep saying that we have to have a more sophisticated conversation about this, so do it. So develop something, so make something happen. And so that was really where the early beginnings were in really school-based social emotional functioning, the affective domain of education, which was always my area of interest, as opposed to the academic and cognitive. And they're definitely, interrelated. Growing up in yeshiva in the 80s, there was very little, no one cared how you felt. That wasn't really anyone's concern.
It's a very big difference in our generation.
So it's totally shifted. The school social work wasn't a concept, and so
there was a school nurse, and that was it.
So we
and I was like, oh, you have a stomach ache? Oh, here's a Band-Aid, right? Like that was like the classic thing. It wasn't like, oh, like you're feeling something, or right?
Yeah. So there were no feelings in the 80s. But we now understand that academic performance and cognitive functioning all relate to how you're feeling.
Sure.
So that was really my focus, and it sort of evolved as society evolves into the digital piece. But it was never my goal, or I didn't have a natural drive towards technology. It wasn't
cool.
it.
Cool.
It just sort of played out that way.
What is your methodology in terms of the digital citizenship?
So digital citizenship is to promote digital responsibility in the age of technology. And so digital responsibility for oneself, for others. And we took an approach, my colleague and I, Tamima Feldman, who was instrumental in developing the curricular piece of this. But we took a three-pronged approach where we wanted to educate parents, we wanted to educate school faculty, and we wanted to educate kids. And so we took that three-prong approach and developed materials and programming, all research-based and data-driven, to that effect. And we wrote a curriculum. Right now it has 10 chapters. It started with, I think, 7 or 8, and we've built on it.
Nice.
But different areas where kids need to have the language and the self-awareness of how technology is impacting them, so they can make better decisions.
Right.
Giving them the language, giving them the awareness to make better decisions around technology. Of course, you need parental support and control, and there's a balance depending on the age. We sort of look at early elementary school, early childhood is predominantly on the parents. Middle school is a good balance where kids have enough self-awareness and some degree of self-regulation, but still the parental component is critical.
Sure.
Once they get into high school, it's really on the kids themselves. The parents have a lot less influence in the day-to-day operation of kids and technology. They can be restrictive.
Right, but only to so much of an extent.
Yeah, to so much of an extent. And we really designed the curriculum where kids could say, oh, I'm feeling impulsive now or disinhibited as a result. And so by giving them that language, they can now be self-aware and then make better decisions around it.
So what would you say is the main focus of what you're trying to accomplish? I guess let's start with parents. With parents, like what's your main goal there?
So, it's interesting because I think the goal has shifted over time. When we first started in 2014, I would say. Yeah, 2014 is when the Digital Citizenship Project launched. I mean, I've been doing some work in the lecturing area around it, but when we really formally launched the curriculum, our goal was to create awareness. So, go back to 2014. 2012 was the big Asifa in Citi Field.
Sure.
And really that was the dialogue. And so the first goal that we had was to break through that it's yes, filters are important, and yes, the content of the internet is problematic. But it's so much more than that. And so that was the first step in educating, that there's a whole realm that we're not addressing. So just creating that awareness. So one of my first articles that I wrote was published in the Jewish press. It was sort of making the case for digital citizenship. Now we sort of take it for granted. Every day there's another study coming out of anxiety and our smartphones and social media and depression. But that didn't exist in 2014, 2013.
Right.
So that was really our first mission, was just to get that awareness out. So there was, lectures, community articles, then over time, as that awareness, I actually thought, by the way, and looking back, it's kind of silly, but I thought I'd be speaking about technology 3-4 years, and then everyone would understand.
Really, that's funny.
And then I'd have to find something else to do.
Yeah.
I just
it's kept you pretty busy.
Yeah, but I thought, all right, well, I can do this for 3 or 4 years. Once everybody knows that technology has issues beyond the content, my job here will be done. And,
right.
So it definitely,
so it's constantly evolving,
well, as technology is
just
evolving, so do the need for reinforcement, reminders, and the latest research and the latest challenges, and the role that technology plays. But one of the pieces that we were always focused on was that we wanted the content of what we were talking about to be fundamental to the human experience. So it wasn't.
What do you mean by that?
So it wasn't going to be like, we're going to talk about Musical.ly. Musical.ly is such a.
You're not talking about TikTok, or Snapchat, whatever. It's just more global concepts that need to be.
The human experience with technology. So whether it's TikTok or Snapchat or Grand Theft Auto or Netflix or whatever the next thing might be, the concepts we want to teach will apply to that as well.
Sure.
So that was also, very much a part of the focus in developing content. And so there's definitely been a shift where we have to sell the concept a lot less today. It's at this point.
Yeah, no, it's
everybody knows.
Everyone sees it. Everyone knows it. It's clear.
So now we're more engaged, I think, creating content that school communities and communities in general that will work best for that community, because there's so much variation and diversity within the Jewish Orthodox and even outside the Orthodox and even outside the Jewish community, where technology is. In some communities, you want to talk about posting positive on social media, that's just not going to fly. So, really identifying what the norms are, and the norms differ from community to community. In the definition of digital citizenship, is understanding that there are different norms. So it's the norms of appropriate and responsible behavior when it comes to technology. So what is normal, what is appropriate, what is responsible will differ from community to community. We also find that it differs from age to age.
Are there any objectives that you would say, or really it's totally subjective to each community?
Let me start by saying I genuinely believe all of us would be better off socially, psychologically, behaviorally, spiritually, without any technology.
Wow.
Like we would all be better off.
Yeah, I hear it.
With that said, that's not a realistic existence in today's modern world.
Sure.
Our job is to function the best we can in the world that we live in. And that changes generationally. And the generations seem to be getting quicker and quicker as technology advances quicker and quicker. But starting from a fundamental idea that we'd all be better off, emotionally healthier without it. With that said, we need to find balance. And in certain communities, if you can live without internet in your house and that works for you, I think you have the opportunity to be I don't want to say better developed, but it's the opportunity for a healthier, less distracted lifestyle exists. So if that can be done, great. There are people today that are switching from smartphones back to dumb phones.
I know, it's like funny now. It's like a trend in a way.
It's definitely a trend, and if you can do it, that's great. That's great. There's going to be sacrifices, though. You have to recognize you're sacrificing some of the conveniences that smartphones bring for lower levels of anxiety, or a less distracted lifestyle, more engaged with family and friends. So it's always going to be that push and pull. So really looking at any individual community within that community's norms, within their expectations, we want to help communities, school communities, figure out how they can maximize what technologies offer them and minimize the inherent challenges. So it really does differ from community to community. I don't think there are any hard and fast rules about technology.
Sure.
But it really, I think what we really try to promote is the idea of being thoughtful and deliberative with how you use technology. So, for example, I do not have a Apple Watch.
Good for you.
Yeah. So, and that's by choice. I do recognize that there are a whole host of conveniences that would come along with it,
Sure.
but there would be a whole host of distractions as well.
Sure.
So I've made a conscious decision that I'm not getting an Apple Watch. Now, I'm placing no judgment on people that do get Apple Watches.
Right.
They've incorporated it into their life and that works for them. Great. For me, it would serve as a distraction. My oldest daughter does not have a smartphone. She's 23 and she doesn't have a smartphone. She used to have a smartphone, but she made the decision, like I made a decision about an Apple Watch, she made a decision about a smartphone, that she's going to, deal with some of the inconveniences.
If you're looking for a great way to have some good, clean, kosher fun with your children through the powerful effect of music, look no further because J Karaoke is here. J Karaoke gives one and all the platform to belt out their favorite tunes from a library of thousands of Jewish songs, hundreds of artists and genres across multiple decades of incredible Jewish music. Personally, I know that I love singing, I love it. I love karaoke, but I was really never able to get into it because it wasn't the Jewish songs. And that's where J Karaoke comes in with their huge selection. From the latest hits to the classics, they even have nursery rhymes for your little ones. And with features like key changes to help you sing, to make you more comfortable as you're singing, and speeding it up or slowing down the song, they have really thought of everything. To enjoy Jewish karaoke your way, all you need to do is head to jkaraoke.com. Choose a subscription that fits for you. And to make it even more fun, you could purchase their state-of-art karaoke kit, which gives you the feeling as if you are today's top singer. You can insert whoever you feel it is. Connect your kit to any device, like it could be a laptop, a computer, a tablet, whatever it is, and you plug in your speaker, plug in your J Karaoke microphone, and you sing away. It's as easy as that. That's all it is, and it's really fun. I checked out their website. It really looks amazing. They have an incredible amount of song selection. Anything you want. They got Thank You Hashem. They got Mordechai Shapiro. They really got it all. You can subscribe monthly for just $4.99 a month, yearly for $49.99, and we have a special deal here for you. For any of our listeners, if you use the code JewsNextDoor, DOR, you get an additional 10% off. And if you don't want your children to be using a device with internet, J Karaoke's got you covered. You can download the app onto your desktop. Once you have it up, turn off the internet, let them sing all day long without the internet. Check out J Karaoke today and let the fun begin. How did she come to that? How did she come to that decision?
I think that spending a year in Israel in seminary, giving the opportunity to spend less time with a smartphone and then ultimately make the decision to not have one is how she came.
Is it something that you spoke a lot about, in the house growing up, as you're raising them?
I mean, we were never discouraging of technology.
Right.
One of the things, I think people misunderstand. I'm not anti-technology. I think technology is awesome. It's amazing. We're doing this now. It's going to get proliferated, throughout the world. The technology is fantastic. COVID, we definitely had an excessive engagement with technology, but what would COVID have been like if we didn't have, right?
That's a good
what
point.
would that have looked like? That would have been a real disaster.
Yeah.
So, we were never discouraging. We were always promoting thoughtful and deliberative practices with it. I remember when one of my daughters was in 10th grade, they were doing a birthday party for someone in my house, and her friends came over, and they all had phones. And as they came in, they took their phones and they put it on the desk, on the table where we keep our keys next to the door. They all put their phones down. I don't have a rule.
Instinctively. They just did it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't have a rule in my house, no phones during social events. I mean, people do, and that's great too. But I happen not to. And they did pick up the phones when it came time. They were baking. They took pictures, and then they put the phones back. At some point, they were educated in school or in their homes that you're going to connect with your friends in a more meaningful, quality way by not being distracted on your devices. And they wanted that experience, but someone had to teach them that.
Yeah.
And really, that's what our goal is. Our goal is to teach. There's a time for technology. There's a time not for technology, but just be thoughtful and deliberative about it.
Whose job is that to teach them that? Is that a parent's job? Is that a school's job? Or what would you think?
So that's a really good question. Just the simple answer is, the role is parental.
Right.
Parents are the biggest influence. The research is consistently supportive of that. Parents are the number one influence on what kids think is appropriate and not appropriate with technology and with other things. Just parents, it doesn't mean that there aren't competing influences, but parents are consistently the most significant influence. So that's an important piece. But it's also interesting, and I think this is more a societal shift in general, the shift of schools being not just buildings of education for kids, but being the family educational model. I think there was more of it in shuls back in the day, in the traditional communal shuls.
The Stiebel and right.
But there's definitely been a shift, and I think it follows with that shift to the understanding of the affective domain of education.
Right.
So I think that shift as well. So now, schools have taken on a degree of responsibility towards educating parents. Some schools have mandatory education nights. Some, that's a relatively new concept.
Right.
If I put on my social work hat for a minute, I think it goes back to systems theory, where the schools recognize that there are multiple systems, and if they want to most effectively educate students, they need to support the systems that a student is experiencing as well.
Sure.
So whose responsibility is it? Definitely parental roles. It's a partnership. Schools often talk about, we're partners, and hopefully they're actually, doing it. It really is a partnership.
Yeah. It's interesting. What you just said got me thinking about how it's so important for a parent to be mindful of, when let's say you're sitting with your child and let's say like watching a video together, like just to show them like a video on YouTube, like that's sending a message in a way that, oh, we're spending meaningful time right now, but it's with a device. Like, and maybe that's something that really shouldn't be happening. Not saying that you can never watch a video with your child, but like, it's just an interesting thing to be mindful of. It just hit me now as you were saying that. Really, just like an interesting thing.
So I get very nervous when I hear categorical statements about anything.
Yeah.
The internet is awful, or the internet is amazing.
I'm not saying that the internet's bad or that device usage is bad, but it's just like that, having that as a part of the the home dynamic. Not always.
So everything's a balance, and that really similarly when you talk about school culture to school culture being different, or community to community, each home is different,
right?
And so there are homes where technology is a feature within the home. So some families have a family movie night,
right?
Or that technology is something that is used. The most important piece is to demonstrate that there's a time for technology, and then there's a time for not technology,
right.
And so it's okay to play a video game, assuming the content is fine. There's actually a lot of research on video game play that kids who game do excel in certain areas.
Right, especially if like they're interacting with people on the video.
Well, there's collaborative problem solving and visual motor integration and drowning out external noise and multitasking. There are all these skills but then there's like a tipping point of like, where do you get the benefit, and then where is it?
It's like too much.
What's the point of diminished returns?
Right.
So I generally say that if you're 35 and living in your parents' basement playing Fortnite all day, you're probably past the point of benefit.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's a qualitative difference of a child playing video games by themselves or playing a video game with a parent. You're elevating the video game play. Now, if you're playing a video game with your parent, for 8 hours a day, that's also problematic.
Right.
But if your child likes sports games, and you're gonna play Madden NFL or something, so that's it's not the technology is the medium, but it's really the interaction.
Right.
That shouldn't be your only interaction. You should be actually going out tossing the football around also. But really finding that balance. And the only way to find that balance is to be thoughtful and deliberative with your technology practices.
Sure.
If your child follows people on YouTube, it's like, know who they are. It's not just that they're on, and talk about it. When my son was younger, he was into something called Dude Perfect.
Love them.
Okay, so
love their stuff.
So he introduced me to Dude Perfect. To me, it didn't hold that much interest, but for him to share that with me and for us to watch some videos together, and
that's a bonding experience.
That's a bonding experience.
Right.
That's showing interest in your children's interests as well. So
Totally.
Finding those opportunities is elevating the technology. And again, everything is a balance.
So getting a little more into child safety in terms of digital child safety. What would be your definition of digital safety?
It's such a broad term, digital safety, generally when people think about digital safety, they're thinking about the content. They're thinking about individuals trying to get information from you, phishing scams.
Right.
So those are definitely pieces of it. So having the right filter will prevent kids from getting on sites that will be problematic. But
well, there's also like internet predators and,
yeah. So, I get beat up every time I talk about it. So I'm going to say it again. It's an issue, but I almost never run into it. In other words, it's an issue like other things are an issue. But if a child understands impulsivity and they understand disinhibition, they're going to make better decisions on how they communicate online.
Interesting.
So it's not just don't talk to strangers, don't share information with strangers. Yeah, it's important to understand that.
Got it.
But
so you're saying parents, that like a parent's job in terms of digital safety would be helping them to realize, what, like you said, impulsivity and like what their actions, how grave not how grave, but how big their actions can be and how important like the effects of their actions can be.
So I see a lot more than hearing stories about or interacting with parents where a predator was a situation. More so, it's a child will share, content that's inappropriate, and it's not, and then they get in trouble for that, or if someone then gets shared around, or the content issues in that sense. And that really goes back to that impulsivity and disinhibition piece. It's become, more normalized. So to me, safety isn't limited to just, putting the filter on. And by the way, without naming specific websites, there are plenty of Jewish news and content websites where the content is extremely problematic. How many dash cam accident videos do you need to see? Or, someone, Kollel family stabbed on CCTV in Lakewood. Like you see these videos, that's very disturbing content, and a filter is not going to help that.
Yeah, that's true.
Aside from the fact when we talk about, being exposed consistently, bombarded with negativity, that impacts your emotional well-being. So to me, all of that falls into the safety realm. Go on most Jewish news websites and just randomly select articles and just see how many are positive and how many are negative.
Right. Well, generally the news is
negative.
Right.
So the question is, when you talk about safety, is it just specific targeted content, the schmutz that we're worried about, or is it the schmutz that's even available?
Right.
Like,
well, that's why I'm asking, what is your definition?
So
you can go as broad, you can get broad and then we can get more specific, but what would you say is like your...
So to me, digital safety is giving kids the tools to make good decisions around technology.
Okay. So what are those tools?
It's the education, it's the language, it's the self-awareness, it's parental modeling, it's an open dialogue of communication, it's creating a safe environment to talk about some of the challenges that inevitably they're going to have to face.
So let take me through some of those. Like you start off with education, the language. Like what does that mean? Educating them that what? I know obviously, like you're saying, the impulsivity. What else? What other components come into play here?
So it's a self-awareness of, it's creating an environment where you can have a conversation, self-awareness of your specific relationship with technology. How is technology impacting your functioning? So a parent knows some of their kids are much more tethered to technology and much more dependent on technology than other kids.
Right.
So why is that? What's happening? Why is child A's relationship different than child B's? It's understanding that child and helping that child understand themselves.
You're saying like the inner workings. There's something going on that's attracting them or attaching them to it more.
We definitely know that kids with anxiety or depression are more likely to develop unhealthy relationships with technology.
Got it. So in terms of, it's like, what could parents do in that situation with, to help children?
So I think that there are three real keys that parents need to be aware of in managing their children's technology. So the first thing is they have to know the device that they're giving to their children. So all too often, I hear from parents, I gave them an iPhone and I didn't know that you could do A, B, or C on it, or I didn't know they could download apps, or I didn't know, I didn't know. Or if it's not an iPhone, it's something else. You have a first grader getting an Amazon Kindle. It's cute. It's a Hanukkah present for $39. It's amazing. and they don't know the device. So the first thing is parents really need to understand you can't give your kids a device without knowing the device, how to operate the device, how to manage the device.
Sure.
If you don't know, go on YouTube and type how to, parentally set. So that's one of the first things that we can do. The second thing is parents need to know the content that they're making available to their children. So I can't tell you how often I hear from, the parents of a 8, 9, or 10-year-old saying, well, I got them Instagram or I got them TikTok and it's become a problem.
Right.
But if you go in the App Store and look up, Instagram or TikTok, it'll say 12 plus.
Right.
So,
and if you even take like one scroll through, you'll see that there's a lot of.
But even that,
without that,
we'll get to to that, like that. That's next level. But like just on a basic, not even TikTok or Snapchat thinks that your 10-year-old should be on TikTok or Snapchat.
Right.
They don't think that. Then if you read the descriptions of like why they don't think that, and you'll see what they're saying about it, I don't think you would want your 15-year-old on it either, but that's a separate point. So yeah, certainly being familiar with the content and what you're making available to them, even from a gaming standpoint. Video games are we looking at the content that might be problematic, or if a game like Grand Theft Auto is extremely violent. It's extremely violent and graphic, and
even more than just that. There's there's a lot of stuff going on in that game.
So even the behavior is it's bad midos. But aside from that, it's just but it's a game. They're playing it, but it's problematic. So it's understanding the devices, it's understanding the content. A lot of parents don't realize that you can set a device that the kids can't download from the App Store. They need to come to you. So really educating yourself.
And you can set how much time they use it,
there's
and
a lot
when
of,
it shuts off, and all.
There's a lot of things. I also recommend, when it comes to content, there's a great website called Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media. Look up any game, any app. They will explain to you what it is. Where the parent reviews, kid reviews, professional reviews. There's no reason that parents should be uneducated in the devices and in the content. Right. The third thing is really know your kid, know your child, because every child is going to respond and react differently.
Sure. That's a good point.
Some kids are highly sensitive.
Right.
Some kids are less sensitive.
Why does that come into play here? I mean, obviously, I know it does.
Because
but I'm saying from your
just because from a content standpoint, because even if you're looking at the device, knowing the regular content that may be regular news content that might be not a big deal for one person can be extremely distressing for another person.
Interesting.
What's going on in Ukraine might be very distressing for some kids, depending on their predispositions. Do they have higher levels of anxiety or social anxiety or depression? All of those are going to influence how they respond to the devices and the content on those devices. Kids with anxiety, particularly social anxiety, are highly likely to develop a dependence on social media and social networking and communicating through the digital realm. One of the things we mentioned before was online disinhibition. So online disinhibition is really the removal of any anxiety that one might experience in a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, so sure. People will say that, like, I mean, I remember when I was growing up, people would say like the craziest things on like instant messenger. I know it's like really a long time ago, but like chat rooms and everything, they would say the crazy things that they would never, ever dream of saying, ever.
So a psychologist in 2004, a guy named John Suller, identified this. He calls it the online disinhibition effect. And it's been, like, the research has been replicated. The Pew studies, if you look at the qualitative sections of the Pew studies, kids are saying, oh yeah, my friend would never use language like that or say things like that in person, but online it's, But
I feel like, I wonder if that's changed a little bit now, because now with like screenshots and, screen capturing like the screen, which is more prevalent. I feel like it didn't exist back like when I was growing up, that now anything that you say could so easily, I mean, it probably existed, but maybe we just didn't do it or didn't know how to do it. But now that it's so prevalent, anyone, anything at all can be screenshot and just like that.
So even with that, people are still, because online disinhibition is an emotional response, and you're describing a cognitive thought. So when we know that impulsivity and disinhibition go hand in hand with technology.
Sure.
So again, if you're more disciplined and you have more awareness and you've been educated, you'll probably do it less. But even today, a lot of people, I don't want to have a difficult conversation with someone, so I'll just text them. I'm not hiring them for this job. I'll just send them an email.
Sure.
Why? Because you're less inhibited. It's
Yeah.
easier. Look at
The Mechila text,
yeah, it's much easier to do that. So that experience is online disinhibition. But now what happens if you have social anxiety and you're uncomfortable in social situations? You just feel that discomfort. But now I can communicate in the digital realm and I don't feel that discomfort. So I'm going to become pretty dependent on that.
Yeah, so that's what you're saying. Know your child. Which child?
Yeah, certain children are going to develop unhealthy habits. And are more likely to. But even the well-adjusted children and the ones without, any, or we all have some mental, health issues. But like even with minimal, they're still more likely. The more time you spend on devices, the more technology you use, your anxiety gets elevated and your mood is impacted.
Right.
But it's so important to be aware of that. I always give the example, just from a connectivity standpoint, that social piece of it. When do we connect best with our children, with our spouses, with our friends? Shabbos.
Shabbos, of course.
Why is that? What's different about Shabbos? And the answer is we don't have the distractions.
Totally unplugged.
Yeah. And it's such a gift that we have.
It's amazing. And I mean, now it's like there's people who now will do it. Like we'll take like a 24 hours of just like
non-Jewish celebrities.
Right.
You hear them going on social media.
Yeah.
In fact, I forget the guy's name. He runs the Digital Wellness Center in Boston Children's Hospital. I forget his name. He recommends a digital Shabbat for everybody.
Right.
That everyone should take time off. So it's real, and David Pelkowitz did a study in 2012 where he found that about 18% of otherwise Shomer Shabbos teens were still using social networking and texting on Shabbos.
Yeah.
It became known as the half Shabbos study.
Sure.
But why is that? There were, in those kids, they found elevated levels of anxiety and
totally.
So that's really.
And I think COVID even. I mean, I remember one of my students telling me last year that the reason he has such a hard time keeping Shabbos, especially more so after COVID, was because he just feels so alone and feels like it makes him feel like he's back in COVID. It gives him those feelings of isolation that he had. So it's like he feels like he just needs to like text his friends and keep in touch with them because it just.
So most of the kids that were texting on Shabbos, it's not that they have an objection to Shabbos. It's not like they have theological questions about
exactly.
It's really just too difficult to not connect.
Right.
And that is, if someone finds that their child is texting on Shabbos, it's not a religious issue. I mean, in some cases it might be, but it's generally, we have to focus on the emotional needs of kids.
Like you said before, knowing the inner workings, like what's really going on.
So the three things parents need: you got to know the device, you got to know the content, what was being made available, and knowing your child themselves.
And how much should parents be speaking to their children about this? And I guess just to add like a caveat to that question, how much they speak to them about it without exposing them too much to things that maybe they don't want to expose them to.
I don't think it's a conversation. I think it's creating an environment within your home where technology is like anything else. It's just something we talk about. Like, in my own home, we do something called going dark for dinner, where there's no technology at the dinner table. So it's part of the natural ebb and flow of the house. And, and sometimes we'll say, okay, let's just everyone put away your technology. Let's just, it's really creating an environment where it's safe to talk about these things. So if your child is going on a computer, generally you want it to be in public places. You want it to, it should be filtered. But then on top of that, the behavior around technology should be one that is not secretive or or it's part of the culture within the home.
Sure.
And so you assess where those.
So you're saying it's not like a formal conversation, anyway. It's just like we set up our family expectations and the way that we like run our household, and it's just like kind of like built in. It's ingrained in it.
Yeah, it's part of the culture. I will say that with my own children, we had formal conversations when it was time for them to get a phone. Mm-hmm. So at that point, we went through a process. We actually created a contract around the phone, and that was a back and forth dialogue, a discussion, the concerns, talking about impulsivity and disinhibition. And so like one of the rules was, before you send a picture, it has to be approved,
by a
the
parent.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And then once they were able to demonstrate that they were making good decisions around picture sharing, so now they can send pictures. They don't have to show me every
Got it.
picture.
So they earn a certain status and
Yeah.
okay,
And socially, the idea of social distraction and things along those lines, and how are you going to talk to them about that? So it really isn't a, you better watch out. The internet's, I don't recommend that. It's really just creating an environment where you can talk about, the challenges. And once they understand, by the way, how the miscommunications happen and there's opportunities to discuss perspective taking, once they understand that, they see it in other people, they can, they can be aware not just of their own behavior, but of other people's behavior as well. So, one of my kids came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, one of my friends is using such bad language in the grade chat," and he was able to identify that.
Right. That's right. And you mentioned just now the contract that you did with your children.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's great. I remember hearing about it a couple of years ago when the schools all were talking about this. I'm curious, for a parent who doesn't have the language or know, what should I be discussing or what should I be putting in that contract? They're not as, well versed as you are because you really work in this.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for a parent?
So I think a parent needs to be educated where some of the concerns are. Mm-hmm. So intuitively, it's interesting because intuitively parents know,
parents are using the devices too, usually.
Yeah.
Right? So they have enough of an understanding of how these devices work, some of the apps work. I mean, not all of them do they know per se, but they have a little bit of an understanding.
You know what it's like? It's like when your kids start driving. So it starts out that, they go for a permit, they take the written test. So you don't have to get the permit for the phone, but you're not going to give your child a car and say, here, you can drive from, from the 5 towns to Bergen County.
Right.
It's just not happening on day one.
Sure.
So there's a process. It's not a formal conversation. Okay. You have to watch out for this. But
it's interesting you say that because I don't know if all parents approach it that way. Meaning, I don't think parents necessarily will say, "I'm going to give you the phone in a permit type way, where you can have it in a permit you can't drive with friends at that point. You can't, I don't think that's necessarily the approach that people.
I don't think it's the approach that they're taking. I think it's the approach they should be taking.
Right.
But
what would be that permit approach? Meaning, what would be the things that a parent should be?
Sharing pictures. So let's start with that. So, until they've had the chance to demonstrate mastery over making good decisions around it,
sure.
Shut-off times. Mm-hmm. There should always be shut-off times, and maybe it gets later. But it's starting out. I'll give you an example. All my kids started out with no web browser on their phone. No web browser. If there was something specific content that they needed, if there was an app available and I approved the app, then they got it. So you start out with no web browser. Then at some point you say, okay, you're demonstrating responsibility. You're not tethered to your device all the time. Okay, we can give you a web browser, but it's a whitelist browser, only the pre-approved websites. So what ends up happening is they, keep coming to you. Oh, I need this website. I need that website. And that's fine.
Right.
You go through that process.
But then you're with them in that process.
Yeah, correct. Right. And it's creating a mechanism for the communication. Their phone shuts off at 10 p.m. Well, I'm planning to do homework tonight with a friend. Can I be on till 10:30?
Right.
So again, now we're moving into the realm of thoughtful and deliberative, and they're demonstrating responsibility. You're giving them that opportunity. So it's the same thing with the car. It's like, okay, let's, you'll drive me to the grocery store, down the road. And then, okay, tonight you can go with one friend in the car, but you can't play music in the car.
Got it.
And then they graduate to being able to go, farther and have music playing and have 2 friends in the car. So it should be a similar process with technology.
I'm curious if it's the same thing with a computer, like a laptop. Like a lot of students, especially when they enter either middle school or high school, will need to get a laptop. So, what do you do the same type of thing? Is it the same type of a permit / contract type of concept, or is it not the same?
So it's a good question. Most of the concern that we have with the behavioral aspects of phone versus a tablet versus a computer are all different. Mm-hmm. So as an example, when you want to send an important email, you're not going to send it from your phone. You're going to wait till you're sitting in front of a computer.
You got to write it out.
Right. So there's a process. Why? Because we are more thoughtful. We are less impulsive with a laptop than we are with with our phones.
Right.
And the phone is with us. For many cases, it's an extension of us.
Right, right.
So, that gradual piece of it, certainly with a computer as well, if the child is demonstrating problematic behavior with a computer, you're going to also set limits as well. So, it also becomes part of that conversation. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a conversation. There should be a conversation, but it's not the conversation.
Oh, I thought you were saying that you only had a conversation more so like when you gave them a device or a phone or whatever. You're saying that's a part of that.
Yeah, but the only time I've had formal sit-down conversations has been when they were getting their phone. That was their first device.
Right.
I suppose if their first device is something else, you're going to have that conversation there as well. When it comes to the public and permanent nature of technology, it's about educating them that that's a real thing. But it almost comes, in talking about, I was looking for a pair of shoes and now I'm being bombarded, left and right with shoes here, shoes there, my social media, I'm getting emails about shoes, et cetera. And it becomes part of that dialogue within the house as well, to discuss the interactions with technology and how it might be impacting overall functioning.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't want, there shouldn't be a misunderstanding. You shouldn't have conversations,
right.
But it's not like having the conversation about technology and then you move on. It's creating a dynamic within the house where technology is part of the ongoing conversation.
Sure. Would you say that there's like a magic number of the ideal number of like hours of of screen time that children should have throughout the day, or I guess that's
people like the magic number.
Not to say a magic number, but I guess what would you say the factors are that go into making the decision of what are the appropriate number of hours for each? And you said it might change for each child or as they show more and more responsibility. So what are the factors that go in there?
So the first thing is, I think that the term screen time is a misconception. We use it, we throw it around a lot. Screen time, all the studies suggest screen time this, screen time that. There's no such thing as a equal equality within screen time. There's different levels of screen time depending on what you're doing. So let's just, to me, the lowest level of screen time would be consumption, Netflix binging. You're sitting in front of a screen and just watching Netflix all day.
What do you mean by the lowest level? Why is that
It's the least productive.
Oh,
it's
okay.
most the most time wasting. It's the
mind numbing.
There's little benefit to it.
Sure.
The next level I would say is complementary. Like even video game play has more benefit than consumption. There's actually a lot of research on the difference between watching television and playing video games.
Right.
And
right. No, you said before that there's like the benefits of.
So consumption has none of those benefits. There's no visual motor integration unless you pointing to the remote. Or,
playing Wii, but not really playing. But that's, I guess, a video game.
Yeah. So and then let's just jump ahead all the way to creative, which is coding, graphic design, video editing. That's a much higher level of functioning with the screen. Right. So how can you compare binging Netflix to? How can you put them in the same category? Binging Netflix to the creative process or online education platforms,
right.
they're two completely different things. So I wouldn't put the same amount of time on the creative process versus the consumption versus the complementary or communication is another piece. If I'm video.
But you're saying if they're involved in the creative process, then it's a positive thing. So therefore,
but even the creative process can be problematic at some point. There's a tipping point for all of this.
Right. So how do we? I guess how do we best?
There's no magic number.
Right. No. So not a magic number. So how do we look at that and say, okay, if this is what you're doing, then this is like a healthy, come to an agreement that this is like a healthy number of time, or not necessarily a number of time, but more like this is a healthy. There's no number. I don't know.
There's nothing wrong with watching a show for a recreational purpose and just that's okay. Just assuming it's not like graphic, violent, whatever.
Right.
But like if a kid wants to watch an episode of something, again, if it's within your family culture it's not the end of the world. It's not, it's like, now the same thing with a video game. Like they want to play a video game, it goes back to any individual child. I want to look at the child in their entirety. In addiction, we talk about the idea of, primary role obligation, and addiction is really problematic when you're failing to fulfill primary role obligation. So similarly with technology, is a child doing well in school? Are they doing their academic work? Do they have a social life? Do they go out with friends and hang? Mm-hmm. So if he plays video games for 30 minutes, I'm a lot less concerned about them than the child who plays for 15 minutes and is not doing well in school and is failing to fulfill their primary role obligation. So it's knowing each individual child and their relationship. Parents know some of their kids, like, they throw tantrums and, have really hard time not being on technology. And a little bit, we're creating a high degree of dependence for our kids on technology. We tend to talk about technology, about teens and technology, but I worry about early childhood kids, ages 1 to 5.
Yeah.
It used to be when a parent would take a child to the doctor, and the doctor would get like a shot. They would pick their child up, they would rub their back, they would make them feel better. What's the child learning in that situation? They're learning that my parent can comfort me, support me, right? It's a positive experience. What do some parents do today? The child's crying.
Video and
here's a phone. Right. And what is the child learning at 2 years old? They're learning that when I'm in pain, when I'm distressed, when I'm unhappy, the phone makes me feel better. So you're creating a much higher degree of dependence even at that age.
Wow.
So
that's powerful. That's very powerful.
I worry about, I do some of these early childhood lectures. People are like, early childhood with technology. Yeah, that's
wow. Yeah, that's very fascinating.
How many parents will put an iPad in their 1.5-year-old's crib just to keep them occupied? So,
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah,
it's very sad. Wow.
I remember a bunch of years ago, it was pre-internet. I guess the internet existed, but pre-smartphone for sure. We were with a family on a ski trip, and they had a pack and play. They put their 2-year-old in the pack and play, put the pack and play in front of a TV, put in a bag of cookies in the pack and play. And, that was, so the modern version of that is putting an iPad in the crib. So it's not like this wasn't going on when there used to be television, but the portability of it and the, every kid at a restaurant on a device, every kid in a stroller on a device, every kid at the doctor on a device, we're really creating high levels of dependence. And then we're frustrated when they won't put the device down. Well, a lot of times we're using it.
So what if that dependency now exists? What can parents do to kind of, I don't know if the right word is wean them off of it, or set up now more healthy? Like, they've realized, oh no, as I'm listening, I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've done that a little bit. Yeah. Now what?
Sorry, it's too late.
Like, is there what type of intervention can one do to kind of now set up more of a healthy boundary and give their child the tools that they need to have more, safety with technology?
So one of the only ways that you can really limit kids' technology use in a meaningful way, where it's not just you're taking something away from them, is to replace it. And that means parents spending more time with their kids. It means taking your kids to the park, going out, throwing the ball around, going to the mall together, doing things that it's hard, if you have 2 working parents and a busy lifestyle. But really, it requires that level of engagement, of supporting your kids' interests, whether it's piano lessons or gymnastics or sports activities or whatever it might be. You need to invest in that at a higher level than you might have otherwise. Right. So that it's great when kids are into reading. That's good. When kids are into sports, that's great. Finding those areas of interest and being supportive of it that are non-digital. So that's really the direction that you need to go in with your kids. Spending more parental, time.
Well, would you say that there's any things that parents don't know about this area that they should know more about, whether it could be, things that they don't even know to ask, or things that they don't know about, dangers or safety, any things in general that you would say, like, it's like, even because parents know a lot of it about it because they use the devices, but things that they just still wow, I didn't realize that.
It's a hard question for me to answer. I'm every once in a while I hear something that surprises me that,
what would be something that surprises you?
I was recently doing programming for a school community, and one of the parents they didn't buy into any aspect that digital technology had any negative impact on children's functioning.
How?
They just did not buy into it. I was like, okay, and I
interesting.
not too long ago, I was talking with some parents about, depression and leading to negative relationships with technology. And I talked about the idea that the heritability of depression, and that there's biological predisposition based on family history.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was like olive bays,
Yeah.
and that was a chiddush to them.
Yeah.
And
That's so interesting.
yeah, so it was, every once in a while I'm surprised. It's a great question. I don't know if there's something specific. I think intuitively, I find more often than not when I speak to parents, I'm more providing them language for something that they intuitively were experiencing but couldn't articulate, and giving them that language to articulate something that is, I think, the most important piece of it.
Got it. You have any final message to share with parents about child safety, specifically in this realm of digital safety?
I think the biggest challenge parents face today is digital technology. I don't think there's a greater challenge, because whatever the other challenges might be are exacerbated by digital technology.
Right.
So, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting to stay on top of
you got to keep up with it. It's crazy.
So, I think that's the final message, is that recognize that it's an exhausting proposition, but you as parents really do make the difference.
Right. Being proactive about it, having the conversations, building it into your culture of your home, and really how you model it. I think you said before also is very important. And then how you really, what messaging you put around technology.
We want to inculcate values around technology. And for that, our kids need to know about it, which means we need to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily in these formal, stiff, conversations, but just as part of the ongoing dialogue with our kids. There's a statistic. I don't know if it's real, because I haven't seen it anywhere, but they say that 60% of parents are concerned about their children's technology habits, but 80% of kids are concerned about their parents' technology habits.
Interesting. Wow.
So, that's part of it. The kids are aware, and kids will say, "Oh, my parents are just as addicted as I am." So it's really creating that space, creating the opportunity, separating from technology, being thoughtful and deliberative about it.
But what's interesting is when you say that, because kids might say, "Yeah, my parents are just as addicted, or even more addicted than I am," but kids don't necessarily know that their parents are being more responsible on the internet, and they don't necessarily see that modeling, because it's, how would they?
Yeah,
they don't see that the way that their parents are interacting with it. So it's like hard to.
That's a great point, and thanks for bringing that up, because I talk about transparency a lot. It's okay if you as the parent need to respond to an email, like you have clients, you have a boss, you have colleagues. You can be transparent. Say, I have an important email I need to respond to, and then I'm all yours.
Right.
So be that way. Show your kids. Show your kids that during dinner time there's
that way it's showing them, I'm not trying to be like addicted right now. It's not that I am addicted. It's that I have this resresponsibility. I need to take care of this.
So
and then
be transparent about it.
Right. That's a good point.
Do going dark for dinner. We have family in Toronto, so we would drive often from the 5 towns to Toronto, and we had a rule in the car that until we were out of New York City, no videos or anything like that.
Nice.
Now it's an 8-9 hour drive, and it takes between an hour and 2 hours leaving New York City. So clearly, it wasn't going to be that impactful that they weren't
meant for those 2 hours that you were
demonstrating something. You were sharing a value that we don't sit on screens all the time. And I think that is something that parents can do more of, and communicate with their children, and create that open dialogue of conversation of. Technology is awesome. It's amazing. This wonderful opportunity that it presents the world we live in. But it shouldn't be the world we live in.
Right.
Technology isn't that world.
Right.
So
That's
I think
great. I love it. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. Really, so much insight here and so much wisdom, and really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much again for joining us for another episode of Raising the Jews Next Door. This episode about technology it's so relevant. Technology is something that our children are experiencing on an everyday basis. Whether it's, at home that they're seeing device usage or have their own devices, or if they're in school with, computers for school use, but it's around them all. And really learning from Dr. Shapiro what the proper usage is and how to prepare our children and how to best manage that is really amazing. And the idea that we can't give our children a device without first knowing the device well and knowing how to manage it and knowing what type of content our children are going to be looking at. We need to teach our children to make good choices, and that's especially true with technology, because what they see and what they experience on technology can be really damaging. You know, when the research came out about the Instagram files, about what they were doing and intentionally to our children, it's sad and it's scary, and we have to be proactive about it. And I hope that you find that this episode a great resource to provide you with the ability to be proactive about it. I would love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on genoff.org. Check us out there. Hit us up with some comments, feedback, send us any questions on the parenting hotline, or reach out to us on Instagram at Parenting the Jews Next Door, Twitter at Yair Manchel. And looking forward to another great episode next week on the concept of domestic abuse with Yeshaya Kraus, who's the Director of Education for Shalom Task Force. And it's really another amazing, really full of so much great insights, another great episode. And looking forward to parenting the Jews next door together.